and it's chapter 14. An hour later, two bruised tourist kids arrived home. We trudged through the gate and up the path, past the hanging bell and the broken line of iron tiles that I still hadn't got round to mending. I leaned against the wall while Lockwood felt for the keys. "How's your hand?" I said. "Sore." "Bottom?" "Sorer." That didn't go well, did it? Lockwood opened the door. I had to see what was in his private room. It was just a chance the mirror might have been back there, but it was all racing forms and account books, half-finished jigsaw his revolting son must have been doing. Winkman keeps the hot stuff somewhere else, of course. He sighed and hitched up his enormous Bermundus as we proceeded down the hall. Still, I suppose the afternoon wasn't entirely wasted. We've seen what sort of fellow Mr. Winkman is firsthand, and we won't underestimate him again. I wonder if George has had better luck. I certainly have. The kitchen door swung open. He was sitting at the table, aglow with vitality, a pencil and a breadstick protruding from his mouth. His eyes widened as he saw our outfits. "Blimey, what are those shorts you're wearing? Lockwood, are you trying to take flight?" Lockwood didn't answer, but stood in the doorway, casting morose eyes over the crisp packets, teacups, photocopied sheets, and old notebooks littering the table. I went to put the kettle on. "They're shorts," I said. "We've been undercover, but we've not had a very good day. I see you've been busy, though. Any progress?" "Yeah, I've been getting somewhere at last," George said. "Heat, proper heat, might just be the answer. Not solar heat, mind. That just makes the plasm shrink. I'm talking thermal. I popped that skull in the oven overnight, and I tell you, it soon got that ghost nicely worked up. The plasm started twirling and coiling at 150 degrees. Turns out that's the magic number. Soon the face appeared, and then, honestly, I think it started talking. Couldn't actually hear it, of course. I need you there for that, Luce. But if my lip reading's anything to go by, it knows some pretty ripe language. Anyway, it's a giant leap, and I'm rather chuffed with myself." He leaned triumphantly back in his chair. I felt a flash of irritation. The skull had recently spoken with me, and at room temperature no less. Those endless experiments seemed suddenly tiresome. Lockwood only looked at him. I could sense the pressure building in the room. I said, "Yeah, we found the skull jar in the oven this morning. We were a little surprised. What I was really talking about was that whole Bickerstaff thing." "Oh, don't worry. I've got news for you on that score, too." George took a complacent crunch on his breadstick. "Tell you what about ovens. They don't make 'em big enough. I could barely get the jar in, and now it's stuck. I mean, that's a poor show. What if it had been a whopping Christmas roast?" "Yes," I said coolly. "How strange would that be?" I found some mugs, plunked tea bags in. But this could be such a breakthrough," George was saying. "Just think, if we could get the dead to speak to us on demand. Joplin was saying it's been the dream of scholars throughout history, and if all of it actually took was just getting a couple of big ovens and—" Lockwood gave a sudden cry. He strode forward into the room. "Will you stop going on about that stupid skull? It's not our priority, George. Are we getting paid for it? No. Is it an imminent danger to the people in London? No. Are we racing against Quill Kipps and his team to solve this mystery and to prevent our public humiliation? No, we aren't. All those things are happening while you bumble about with jars and ovens. Lucy and I risked our lives today, if that's of any interest to you." He took a deep breath. George was staring at him as if mesmerized. "All I ask," Lockwood said, "is that you please try to focus on the job in hand. Well, what do you say?" George pushed his glasses up his nose. Sorry, can you repeat that? It's those shorts. I couldn't concentrate on what you were saying." The kettle boiled loudly, drowning Lockwood's brief response. I made 3 hasty cups of tea, bagging the spoon about, rattling the fridge door, and trying to fill the ensuing silence. Didn't really work. The atmosphere wasn't fast improving. So I doled out the tea like a sullen waitress and went upstairs to get changed. I took my time about it too. It had been a difficult afternoon, and our encounter with the Wickmans had left me more than shaken than I had admitted to Lockwood. The soft touch of the man's hand, the implicit violence in his movements. I suddenly viewed my silly tourist outfit with extreme dislike. Up in my attic bedroom, I dressed swiftly in my usual dark top, skirt, and leggings, the heavy-duty boots too, and agent's clothes, clothes you don't mess with. It was a small thing, but it made me feel better. I stood at the window looking out at the dusk, the silence of Portland Row. I wasn't the only one who seemed unsettled. Lockwood's irritability was unusual. The urgent need to beat Kipps to the mirror was clearly preying on his mind. Or was it? Maybe it was something else that bothered him. Maybe it was the skull and its whispered insinuations. On my way downstairs, I paused on the first floor landing. Polynesian spirit chasers and ghost wards hung shadowed on the walls. I was alone. I could hear Lockwood and George's voices below me in the kitchen. Yes, there it was, the door that must never be opened. There are other things in this house to fear besides me. An impulse overtook me. I tiptoed over and pressed my hands and ear to the wood of the door. I let my inner senses take control, listening, listening. No, there was nothing. Really, I should just open the door and take a look inside. It was unlocked. What could possibly happen? Or I could just mind my own business and forget the lying, wheedling words of that foul thing in the jar. I tore myself away, set off down the stairs. Yes, I did want to delve a little deeper into Lockwood's past, but there are other ways I could do it other than snooping. Flo had mentioned an old master of Lockwood's who had seemingly come to a nasty end. Perhaps I could follow George's example and visit the archives one day. They were still in the kitchen, at the table, nursing cups of tea. Something must have happened while I was gone, however, because ham and mustard sandwiches were now piled high in the centre of the table, together with bowls of cherry tomatoes, gherkins, and crinkly lettuce and crisps. It looked pretty good. I sat. We ate. All better now, I said, after a while. Lockwood grunted. I've apologised. George said, Lockwood's been drawing that missing object from the Bickerstaff coffin. You know, the thing we saw in the photo. What do you think? I took a look at the thinking cloth. It wasn't very good sketch, since Lockwood can't really draw. 3 or 4 parallel lines with sharp ends. Looks like a bundle of pencils, I said. Bigger than pencils, Lockwood said. More like sticks. Reminded me of those folded up tripods in the Times that the photographers used to use whenever they took photos in Mrs. Barrett's tomb. He had a bite of sandwich. Doesn't explain where they disappeared to, though. Anyway, let's talk business. I filled George in, more or less, on what we've been doing in the last 24 hours, and he's not happy. George nodded. Too right. I can't believe he went blundering into Winkman's shop like that. If he's the man you say he is, that was a terribly rash thing to do. We had to make a snap decision, Lockwood said, with his mouth full. Okay, it didn't come off, but it might have done. Sometimes, George, we have to act on the spur of the moment. Life's not all poodling about with ghost jars and paperwork. Oh, don't get mad at me again, I'm just saying. Listen, I'm in the front line too, George growled. Who was it who got a face full of that haunted mirror the other night? I can still feel the effects now. It's like something's tugging on my mind, calling to me. I reckon I wasn't far off meeting the same end that that relic man was that we found. And that's not a nice sensation. There were 2 small, red points on his cheeks. He looked away. Anyway, my pooling has rounded up plenty of good stuff, so don't think you'll be disappointed. We've made more progress, more than Kip's or Bobby Vernon now, I'm sure. Night had fallen. Lockwood got up and closed the kitchen blinds, blocking out the darkness of the garden. He switched on a second light and sank back in his chair. George is right, he said. I phoned Barnes while you were upstairs, Luce, and Kipps isn't doing well. He hasn't got a lead on either Jack Carver or the Mirror. Deeprak's holding cells are filled to bursting with half the relic men in London, but Carver isn't among them. There's no clue as to where his whereabouts is. Barnes is a little frustrated. I told him we were following a hopeful lead. Did you tell him about Winkman? I said. No, I don't want Kipps muscling in on that. It's our best hope of success. The secret auction, so long as Flo can get us the news of it in time. Where have you been hiding this Flo Bones? George asked. She sounds like a useful contact. What's she like? Soft-spoken, mild-mannered and gentle, I say. Classy. You know the type. I think you'd get on well with her. George pushed his spectacles up his nose. Really? Good. So then, George, Lockwood said, it's over to you. What did you find out about Bickerstaff and the Mirror? George tidied his papers and stacked them neatly beside the remaining sandwiches. His annoyance had subsided. He now had a keen and business-like air. Okay, he said. As expected, the National Archives didn't let me down. My first protocol was the Hampstead Gazette article Albert Joplin showed us, the one about the rats. I found that and made a copy. I've got it here. Well, you'll remember the basics. Our Edmund Bickerstaff works at a sanatorium. That's kind of like a hospital for people with chronic illnesses on Hampstead Heath. He had something of a bad reputation, although the details are hazy. One night he has a private party with his friends when his body's discovered. It's been almost entirely devoured by rats. Eesh, just thinking about it makes me reluctant to chomp on one of these cherry tomatoes, but I will anyway. So it doesn't mention him being shot then, I said, remembering the corpse in the iron coffin and the round hole in its forehead. Not shot, then eaten? Nothing about that at all, but it's quite possible the newspaper didn't get the story entirely right. Some of the specifics might have been missing or left out. Lockwood nodded. That whole rat story sounds daft to me. Find any other newspaper accounts? Not as many as you might expect. You'd think the rats would have made all the front pages, but there's very little. It's almost as if the story was being deliberately suppressed. But I did find a few references, some extra details. One theme that keeps coming up is Bickerstaff had a nasty habit of hanging around graveyards after dark. No shame in that, I said, crunching on a gherkin. We do that too. We aren't seen creeping home after midnight with a bulging bag over our shoulders and grave dirt dripping from our shovels. One paper says he sometimes have a servant lad with him. Poor kid, dragging around heaven knows what behind him with a heavy sack. Hard to believe no one arrested him, I said, if there are witnesses. It may be he had friends in highish places, George went on. I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, a couple of years later, the Gazette reports that someone went into Bickerstaff's house. It had been standing empty, guess no one wanted to buy it, and discovered a secret panel in the living room, and behind that panel they found, he chuckled, paused dramatically, you'll never guess. A body, I said. Bones, Lockwood took some crisps. George's face fell. Oh, I suppose I'd given you a clue. Anyway, yes, they found all sorts of body parts stacked in a hidden room, some of them very old. This confirmed that the good doctor had been going around digging up things he shouldn't, but precisely why he should do so wasn't clear. And this didn't make the headlines either, Lockwood said. I've got to admit that's a bit odd. What about Bickerstaff's friends? I said, frowning. Didn't Joplin say there was a whole gang of them? George nodded. Yes, I made progress here. One article gave the names of two of his supposed associates, people who were meant to have been at his final gathering at his house. They were young aristocrats named, he consulted the notes for a moment, Lady Mary Dulac and the Honourable Simon Wilberforce, both rich, with reputations for being interested in strange ideas. Anyway, get this. George's eyes glinted. From other references, I found it seems Bickerstaff wasn't the only one to disappear in 1877. Dulac and Wilberforce also vanished around that time. What, as in never seen again vanished? I said. Right. Well, certainly in Wilberforce's case, he grinned at us. Of course, there were rewards offered, questions asked in Parliament, but no one seems to have openly made the connection with Bickerstaff. Some people must have known, though. I think it was hushed up. Anyway, now we move on 10 years to the sudden reappearance of Mary Dulac. He rummaged in his stack of papers. Where was it? I'm sure I had it. Here we go. I'll read it to you. It's from the Daily Telegraph in the summer of 1886, a long time after the Bickerstaff affair. Mad woman captured. The so-called wild woman of Chesterley Forest, a scrawny vagabond whose demented howls have caused consternation in the wooded district for several weeks, has been apprehended by police. Under interrogation at Town Hall, the lunatic who gave her name as Mary or May Dulac claimed to have been living for a beast for many years. Her ravings, matted hair, and hideous appearance disturbed several gentlemen present. She was quickly removed to Chesterley Asylum. A silence fell after George finished. Is it just me, Lockwood said, or do bad things happen to people who have anything to do with Bickerstaff? Let's hope that doesn't include us, I said. I haven't got to the bottom of the Dulac business yet, George added. I want to go to Jesterley to check out the records office there. The asylum shut in 1904. Uh, Among the items listed as being removed from the library uh, and taken into records office at the time was something called The Confessions of Mary Dulac. To me that sounds like something worth reading. It certainly does, Lockwood agreed. Although I suppose being a mad woman's confessions, it might just be about eating bugs and things in the woods. Still, you never know. Well done, George. This is excellent. It's just a shame there was nothing about the mirror, George said. It killed that guy Nettles in the cemetery, and it did something weird to me. I can't help but wonder if it was involved in Bickerstaff's death as well. Anyway, I'll keep looking. The only other interesting thing I found uh, out about that hospital Bickerstaff worked at, Greengate's Sanatorium on Hampstead Heath. Joplin said it burned down, didn't he? I said. Yeah, in 1908, with quite a loss of life. The site remained undeveloped for more than 50 years until someone tried building a housing estate there. Lockwood whistled. What were they thinking? Who builds a house on a site of an old Victorian hospital that burned down in tragic circumstances? George nodded. I know, it's almost the first rule of planning. As you'd expect, there were enough supernatural disturbances for the project to be shelved, but when I was looking at the plans, I discovered something. Most of the site's just grassland now, a few walls, overgrown ruins, but there is one building still standing. We looked at him. You mean? Turns out, Bickerstaff's house was set slightly away from the main part of the hospital. It wasn't touched by the fire. It's still there. Used for what? I said. Nothing. It's derelict, I think. As you'd expect, given its history. Who in their right mind would go in there? Lockwood sat back in his chair. Great work, George. Tomorrow you nip down to Chesterley. Lucy and I will try to pick up Jack Carver's trail, although I don't know how we'll do that. He's well and truly disappeared. Right, I'm off upstairs. I'm totally bushed, plus it's high time I got out of these shorts. He made to rise. At that moment there was a knock at the door. Two knocks. A brisk tap-tap. We looked at each other, one after the other, and we slowly pushed our chairs back and went out into the hall. The knocking came again. What time is it, George? Lockwood didn't need to ask, really. There was a carriage clock on the mantelpiece, a grandfather clock in the corner, and from his parents' collection, an African dream-catching timepiece that told the hour using ostrich feathers, cheetah bones, and a revolving nautilus shell. One way or another, we all knew what time it was. 20 minutes to midnight, George said. Late. Far too late for any mortal visitor. None of us actually said this, but it was what we were thinking. You replaced that loose tile in the iron line, of course, Lucy, Lockwood said as we looked down past the coats and table with the crystal lantern. The only lights in the hall were a faint yellow spear spilling out from the kitchen. Various tribal totems hovered in the fuzzy half-dark. The door itself could not be seen. Almost, I said. Almost finished. Almost got round to starting. Another double knock sounded at the end of the hall. Why didn't they ring the bell? George said. The notice clearly says you have to ring the bell. It's not going to be a stone knocker, I said slowly, or a Tom of Shadows. Even with the break in the iron line, they'd surely be too weak. That's right, Lockwood said. It won't be a ghost. It's probably Barnes or Flo. That's it, of course. Flo, it must be Flo. She goes out at night. Of course she does. We should let her in. Yes. None of us moved along the hall. Where was that recent strangling case? George said, where the ghost knocked on the window and killed the old lady? George, that was a window. This is a door. So what? They're both rectangular apertures. I can be strangled too. Another knock, a single one, a clashing reverberation on the wood. Ah, to hell with this, Lockwood snarled. He strode down the hall, switched to the crystal lantern, snatched up a rapier from the umbrella stand beside the coats. Bending close to the door, he spoke loudly through the wood. Hello? Who is it? No answer came. Lockwood ran a hand through his hair. He flicked the chains aside, undid the latch. Before opening the door, he looked back at George and me. Got to be done, he said. It might be someone who needs our... And the door burst open, knocking into Lockwood. He was flung back hard against the shelves. Masks and gourds toppled, crashing to the floor. A hunched black shape careened into the hallway. I caught a glimpse of a white, contorted face and two madly staring eyes. Lockwood tried to bring his rapier around, but the shape was on him, crawling at his front. George and I sprang forward, came pelting down the hall, a horrid, gargling cry. The thing fell back, away from Lockwood, out into the lantern light. It was a living man, mouth open, gulping like a fish. His long, gingery hair was wet with sweat. He wore black jeans, a jacket, a stained black t-shirt. Heavy lace-up boots stumbled on the floor. George gasped. Realization hit me too. Carver, I said. That's Jack Carver, the one who stole... The man's fingers scrabbled at his neck, as if he were trying to pull words loose from his throat. He took one step towards us, then another, then, as if newly boneless, his legs gave way. He collapsed forward onto the parapet flooring, striking his face hard. Lockwood pushed himself away from the shelves. Lockwood and I halted, staring, all three of us gazing at the body laid out on the hall before us, at the twitching fingers and the dark stain spreading out beneath him. Most of all, at the long, curved dagger deep into his back. And that's the end of that chapter, and also the end of that part. We'll be going on to chapter 4, or part 4 next. And after that, I think there might only be one more part. Yeah. Yeah, but it's the biggest part. Yeah, yeah. 5's the big night out. And we'll stop at 5, but we'll do 4. All right. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.